then. Thank you for agreeing to have a chat with me. Okay, it's a social experiment. All I do is I ask you a few questions, get you to think a little bit, and see how you feel about things, and we might be able to encourage each other to see each other's point of view on a particular topic or topics. All right, okay. So, just the first question is, what is your position on oppression?
I think that human nature, unfortunately, we have a long history, and I think it might be in human nature to want to get ahead in life, and I think sometimes the byproduct of that is oppressing people. Think about this, like slave trade and going back through history, and obviously slave trade went far before and beyond the Western slave trade, the commercial one. It was rife in Africa before that, and obviously other cultures throughout the world. It seems to be that one group will seem to oppress another group.
And it seems to me, would you agree that they do that and they attempt to justify that by saying, they're different to us, they're not as good as us?
Well, you look at Nazi Germany and the kind of eugenics and trying to tie race in as part of oppression, social class, the caste system in India, and obviously there's many examples even now, the Muslims in China. So I think that sorry, what was the question?
Just about oppression, and you're obviously clearly well educated on these topics. It was about oppression and whether you think it's fair and right and has a place in society, and we should be okay with that.
No, definitely not. And I think that we've made great leaps. I think it's easy to overlook the way we've come. Like, I've mainly worked for female bosses. Like, I've worked for women that have been empowered and strong and managed to balance their careers and lives. And I think that I've employed and worked with lots of kind of black and other minority ethnic kind of successful leaders. So I see a different point of view. I work in California half the time, and I think that there's a lot of progress we've made. But I think there's, the unconscious bias is still there, and I think there's also, it's easy to live in your liberal bubble when actually the reality is quite different. I think, talk about racism and other things that are still prevalent.
Okay. So would you say that just because the powerful have the ability to oppress others, that doesn't necessarily it doesn't make it right? Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah. What about if the powerful have been doing it, we've already touched on it, for a very long time, and it's become embedded in culture? Does that make it acceptable?
No, and
should we challenge that?
We should, and it needs new thinking and new structure. I mean, if you go onto like socio-economic oppression of almost going back to the class system a little bit, I think social mobility is one way of overcoming oppression, is kind of getting a meritocracy, yes, but a meritocracy that we support oppressed groups and kind of give each other a leg up.
Okay.
I think that's important.
Yeah. Okay. And would you agree also that people who are maybe more it sounds like similar to what you're saying. Didn't understand some of the words. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
It's okay. What was that word you used? What was the word?
Meritocracy. So basically, people in society have equal opportunity, and those who try hard and have talent rise to the top.
Yes.
That's the society I want to live in.
So that's what we should do. Okay, so that's similar to what I was going to ask now. So what about the disadvantaged groups? Should we give you said a bit of a leg up? We should strive to give them a little bit to get them on that level playing field.
That's the thing. I think a true meritocracy would enable everybody. Like, if you're born into a difficult circumstances, you should have the same access to education and business opportunities, whatever you want to go into. But I think that needs a little bit of engineering to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And that's the complicated part, right? it's already, wow, this is a lovely area where we are now. You know, my kids go to school here,
Yeah,
and
nice.
they're very lucky.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, but there's other kids going to school in rougher areas and that don't have the same access to education and opportunity. So yeah, I think the socio-economic oppression is going to take a while to. Well, it's almost an impossible challenge.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. What about if the oppressed group or groups or individuals don't realise they're being oppressed? Is that something we can just say, oh, that's okay because they don't realise?
Do you have any example? Like,
Well, I suppose I'm thinking about like people who might have a cognitive impairment,
right?
or some other form of disability,
Yeah.
or I suppose I'm just thinking sort of a hypothetical. If it was like people in a particular sort of quite isolated part of the world, and they lived on an island, and they didn't realise that they were sort of, it become embedded that they do everything, they work sort of 15 hours a day, and that's the norm to them, and they don't realise, and they don't know any better. Their children after them, they do the same. But in the background there are people who are sort of benefiting off of that. Is that okay if they don't realise that they might be okay some of the time? They don't really know what true happiness is, probably. Is that alright if they don't really realise? Does it make a difference?
Yes, I think understanding. Let's take that scenario of like not being aware. Like, I think the kind of key to overcoming oppression is surely awareness first. Being aware of like the systems of power and control. Like in that scenario, if there was like somebody controlling their means of wealth or their income or their lives, I think step one would be obviously make them aware of that. And then step two would be like, what can we do about it?
So someone challenging that.
I think so.
Who's got the ability to do so. And challenging the norms. What's become a norm there.
Yeah, which is obviously in an age of social media as well, everything gets so polarised that, you know, you could have progressive views that can easily get written off as, you know, woke and extreme left, and kind of, you know, it's hard to make some rational arguments online that are balanced. Whereas everything's binary.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people would say that they are sort of stand up for what's right, but if they critically think about the society that they're in, it might be that they find there's some contradictions in what they're saying that they stand for.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've kind of already touched on it, but just to clarify as well, it's a fairly new phrase that I've heard of, but I think it's a good one. Phenotypes. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's to describe sort of different either physical characteristics or characteristics about someone, sort of mobilises, moves around, characteristics that make an individual them. Should we discriminate on phenotypes?
No, not from that definition. No.
Okay.
And do you feel we do?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I do. So I'll lead on to the next question. Might be a bit more tricky because this is where I'm coming from about critical thinking. It's something that I've thought about in the last few years, and it's made me sort of change in terms of aligning my values with what I think is more in line with how I live my day to day now. So the next question is, maybe I've given away too much there, but the next question is, what do you think about pigs, cows, chickens, animals that we exploit for everything that they've got and then put them in slaughterhouses when they're no longer used to us? Do you think we're oppressing them?
It's a deep question because it comes on to the question of the soul and consciousness to me. Like, you know...
Is that from a religious perspective?
No, just from a kind of, I guess, a spirituality perspective. I think that... that's such a tough question.
It's not a got you question. It's just that's where I was leading to. Though.
So I eat meat. I've reduced the amount I eat, but I still eat meat, and I still feed the kids meat as well.
Hmm.
And you know, I am aware of the industry and the process and the flaws, and also the sustainability issues with like beef farming, for example.
Yes.
So I'm aware of these things, but I made a choice of like, I guess is it called cognitive dissonance, where you know
Yes.
one thing is true and yet you choose to
It's about where I was saying about what before, about where your values are one, but then your actions aren't in sync with that.
I do fundamentally believe that animals and humans are different. I do, but equally, the more I'm learning about like intelligence in animals and mammals, it doesn't seem right. And I think that when you're, you know, buying a free-range egg, for example, I think that we have images of open fields and happy chickens, and you know, but in reality, that probably just means they get like a little bit of time outside, maybe sometimes.
You're almost spot on. It's virtually nothing. Yeah.
So I think that these kind of marketing tools as well, there's a lot of marketing that goes on in the industry to make you look like you're making a responsible decision.
Yeah.
But the reality is probably less so. I think we have a problem feeding our population as like humanity. We have globally, but it doesn't make sense to me to be chopping down rainforests to grow crops to feed animals to feed humans.
You've got
that doesn't
you're
make sense.
A lot more ahead than lots of people. I didn't realise this until a few years ago. It's a leading cause of deforestation.
Yeah.
Animal agriculture.
Yeah, and it doesn't really make sense.
Because people think, oh well, there's not enough crops to grow around for the world, but actually, what are we feeding the animals?
Yeah.
A lot of them are a lot bigger than us. Need a lot more food, and we breed approximately between 80 and 90 billion land animals every year, just to be killed each year.
Yeah.
You know, there's 8 billion humans, so it's like they outnumber us 10 to 1. It's completely unsustainable from that point of view. But I'm coming at it from a rights perspective, because just picking up on a couple of things that you said there. Are you okay for time for a few more minutes?
I've got a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You know, you're talking about intelligence, and you know, like for example, pigs, quite a bit more intelligent than dogs. For example, people think dogs are super intelligent. Pigs have been known to work out sort of cognitive tests that they've done to free themselves from stables. You know, lifting up the latch, working in collaboration with one another. They've passed what's called the mirror test. Have you heard of that? Where basically an animal has got that self-awareness, so they recognise themselves in the mirror.
Okay.
You know.
So I don't think a cat does. But,
I'm not sure about a cat, to be honest. But you know, you talked about consciousness.
Yeah.
Well, it's been acknowledged by, I think it's Oxford University, Declaration of Consciousness. More recently, New York Declaration of Consciousness.
Right.
All these mammals do have consciousness. But most importantly for me is the sentient. So they have the ability to suffer, to feel pain.
Yeah.
They've got, you know, you said they're different. I agree with you, animals are different, but I would put to you, would in the ways that matter, they're the same to us?
Yeah. You know, like the kind of it's been discredited a little bit. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it starts with kind of security
basics,
and shelter and all that. I think that you know, animals probably operate, like you say, the same as any other, like us and everyone else on those levels, and they're probably aware of obviously lack of shelter, lack of food, lack of warmth, and even that kind of going up into that kind of belonging and togetherness. I think, you know, I see dogs all the time that seem unhappy, and I think it's because they're pack animals and they're left alone a lot. So I think like it probably goes beyond just the farming kind of element of it as well.
It does.
But yeah, I think, talking to you, it's not a good world that we've built.
It's just that it's unnecessary, because we can get all, you know, so what I am now is vegan. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Tell me what you think it means.
I think it means like anything that's been involved in like animal processing at all. So like, for example, a vegetarian would eat eggs, but a
Milk,
vegan wouldn't.
You're pretty much spot on. So in its most basic form, it just means respecting animals.
Right.
A slightly longer version is being against the exploitation of and violence towards animals, and reducing harm as far as possible. So obviously, you don't want to pay for them to provide us with products such as eggs and milk. Don't want to eat them. Don't want to wear them. Don't want to go to zoos, use them for entertainment. All of those things, as far as possible. You know, people will say, well, animals get killed when you're walking around. Well, of course they do. We're not perfect. We can't eliminate all that. If we build a house, there's going to be animals. And then people will say about crops and crop deaths and stuff, but they fail to realise that, well, they're not being exploited. That's not purposeful for that reason. We've got to eat something. And also, if you're, like you rightly said before, if you're eating meat, you're causing a lot more incidental deaths through that crop production because of all the crops that are fed to the animals, and it's a very inefficient way of getting the nutrients that we need after we can get them direct from the source, essentially. But just mindful that you haven't got probably too much more time, taking a bit of your time. Do you know much about, for example, the dairy industry? People think dairy and eggs are quite benign industries, and cows just eat grass and they give us milk. It's not quite like that. Do you know much about the dairy industry?
Not really any more than...
I didn't until a few years ago, and I didn't even realise. I thought it was that. They just ate grass and gave us milk, and it's all very friendly and fine. It's actually couldn't be further from the truth. So what happens is a farmer needs to... they don't wait around for cows to reproduce themselves. They forcibly impregnate them because they want to be more efficient, really. Cow needs to be pregnant in order to be able to give milk. So what they do is they forcibly impregnate. A farm will get a big long glove on their arm. They'll have the bull semen. They'll put it in a type of long type syringe, metal rod. They'll put one arm up the cow's anus, hold the cervix in place while they inject in the vagina the syringe. They're in a rack, so to keep them in place so they can't move around. They've already used what's called an electroejaculate to essentially...
It doesn't sound much fun.
to masturbate the bull, basically, to get the semen.
Yeah.
Now, when the cow has the baby, they have a 9-month gestation period like a human does. And they're mammals as well, so they have that bond with the natural bond with their baby. But the farmer wants the businesses to sell the milk, so they don't want the baby drinking all that milk. So what they do is they separate the babies, usually within 24 hours.
Right.
They put them in little sort of huts away from the mother. The mother gets very distressed, so that's, to me, is already almost a form of torture, really.
Yeah.
Now, if the baby is born, if the calf's born female, will be the same fate as the mother, which is being forcibly impregnated year after year after year, to about 5 or 6 years, after which point the body can no longer take any more of that, because nobody's designed to be pregnant every single year, and then they'll kill them because they can no longer produce the milk to sell them for meat. Okay, cow can live for 20, 25 years, natural lifespan. So it's a quarter of their lifespan that they're killed. If it's a male calf that's born, what do you think happens to them? They can't produce milk.
Well, there's the veal industry, isn't there? I don't know what proportion go into
They'll either
it,
be grown a little bit. The veal industry, what they do is I think it's illegal in this country now, but they'll ship them abroad to like Belgium, France, and then they put them in a dark room, shackled, for approximately 16 weeks, and then they'll kill them for a veal. Some farmers don't even do that, and they'll just kill them pretty much on the day that they're born, because they don't produce milk. They've been known to just leave them to starve because there's no cost of having to get someone to kill them or send them to a slaughterhouse. Is that something that you feel like you feel comfortable supporting?
Well, I think for one, it's a waste of a life and resources from a practical point of view. But I mean, it's it's not great.
It's pretty horrible, isn't it? Yeah. And again, another one that people think is quite a benign industry is the egg industry. I used to think it was. I used to think, they just pop out these eggs and then we eat them. It's not like that. It starts from the hatchery, where it's like in a factory, and they've got all these little chicks. They literally put them onto a conveyor belt. Well, they separate them because they can tell by the slightly different coloured males and females.
Right.
Similar to the dairy industry. In the egg industry, the males are classed as a waste product. So they go down one conveyor belt and they literally go into a blender. That's RSPCA approved, would you believe? Practice.
Really?
You can search that on RSPCA, please. After this conversation today, I am a stranger to you. Please research what I've said. Check the validity of it.
That's horrendous. That's like that's horrendous. I mean, that's horrendous from a imagery point of view.
It is. It really shocked me. It actually almost knocked me sick when I first found that out.
Yeah. That's It's really hard because I think we're also wrapped up in our lives, and you know, we're bombarded with social media, and like everyone's busy and got distractions, and I think that it's an inconvenient truth, isn't it? I think that's the title of some documentary.
It
sure
is.
I've
I think
seen.
it's
It's
what's his name,
inconvenient.
the American politician.
Oh yeah, Al Gore, was it?
Al Gore.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
an
Probably
environmental
unrelated
one,
to this conversation, but
no, it is related,
but-
but that's an environmental sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, more so.
yeah, but it's just no one wants to face. That's the
But
way
we have
that
to,
we
though. I
eat.
think. Yeah, that's
We
why
have
I'm
to.
here. Yeah.
I understand. I understand.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think so I understand a little bit about the food industry. So I've worked for suppliers that sell to Tesco and Sainsbury's and Waitrose and all those.
Yeah.
So I've gone to those meetings where the buyers are making a decision around what products they stock. And what I would say is that it's largely commercial driven.
Yes.
It's commercially driven. So it's driven on what profit margin percentage are they going to make on that line of products
Sure.
versus this line of products. And then how much is the supplier going to invest in marketing to promote the products, and then to discount them and do multi-buy deals and club card offers and all these kind of things. So I think that fundamentally that's got to change. There's got to be some kind of ethics, but also helping the consumer. Like, we've got to walk into a shop, be aware and educated, and have options.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, I was never taught cooking in school, and I think that's improved, I believe, a little bit.
Yeah.
But the fact is, like, we should be able to, as a consumer, walk in and have ethical options on the shelves that help us feed our kids. In my case, like, I'm rushing to get meals ready,
Of course.
and like I need easier options. So I think
Yeah.
it needs to be. We need to look at the way we stock our shelves generally, and say that, you know, like Tesco, like I'd say Tesco, supermarkets are good in they do their research and they go to the factories and the farms, and in some cases, and they do their testing occasionally, and there's some really good buyers and they try and make good choices, but ultimately they're driven by commercial. That's what they're measured by. Ultimately, bottom line, how much profit are you going to make buying and selling these goods on your shelves? And we need a way of, and it might involve government. If it is expensive to have alternatives, or it's complicated, we need to have a way of bridging that gap until alternatives are mass produced to a certain level.
There's been studies around the cost of plant-based foods, and in Europe, Australia, America, and they've concluded they're consistent in saying that they're 30% cheaper overall. If it's a predominantly plant-based diet, you can get the alternatives, and I would advocate for the alternatives that are healthier, you know, like the plant-based meats and such. They do tend to be a little bit more expensive. They have come down in price, I've noticed, over the last couple of years, because meat is heavily subsidised. Animal agriculture is not a viable thing anymore. It's the cost is not a real cost that you see in the supermarket. That's been heavily subsidised, because to make a plant burger, you can imagine it's a lot cheaper than rearing the animal for that time and then killing them and all of the processes involved. It's a lot cheaper, but like what you were saying, don't be fooled by them saying, oh, this is an ethical farming. Ultimately, it's exploiting animals, and yes, free range means something, but very, very little. They get a little bit extra. Free range hens are all in one huge barn, several thousand of them, very little space. They do open it up in the day, but it's like literally the pecking order. Only some of them can get out. The rest of them can't. Half of them are like squashed, you know. They often sort of just die on their faces. It's really unpleasant. It's all just humane washing, really. It really is. But, you know, I'm going to let you go in a minute, but don't take my word for it. I'm essentially a stranger to you. I'm going to give you a little card, if that's all right, just a couple of resources to look into it a bit more. And just one last thing to say, like, I've got 3 children myself, and I'm probably a bit like you in so much that I just encourage them with more sort of plant-based options. My wife's not vegan. She definitely eats more plant-based. Whenever I talk to her, or try to talk to her about veganism and sort of being fair to animals, because I know she's a kind person, I know she cares about dogs, cats and stuff, she just goes off. Because it's cognitive dissonance. I only have to mention the word vegan, and she goes off her head. So I can't talk to her, and they do say that talking to family and friends around this issue is the hardest thing. I've had more success talking to people who have never, like yourself, who have never met before until the day. One very last thing.
Yeah.
Pigs killed at 6 months old in
Right.
gas chambers.
Right.
Would you believe 90% of them still use gas chambers, and we all think of the Jews in Nazi Germany, don't we? And for them, but they're still used because it's very efficient to do it that way. CO2, very aversive gas, burns their eyes and all the sorts of wet ears, all the wet areas of their body,
Yeah.
and they choke within a minute or two.
Yeah.
And then they roll out there, they cut the throat. So it's just not something that I decided I wanted to support anymore, and I don't need to, because if you look into the nutrition aspects, the Academy, the largest institution of dietitians and nutritionists, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics globally, made up of thousands of nutritionists and dietitians.
Yeah.
Most of them are non-vegan, but they agree that a vegan diet is adequate for all stages of life if adequately planned.
Okay. Yeah, because that's obviously one consideration, is like getting the essential, like.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for anyone to be
minerals
malnourished or anything like that.
So if you were saying, right, you could make one step in the right direction, would it be like stop eating pork first, and bacon and stuff, like, or because I think it's going to be hard to get people to go all in.
You have to do step by step. I appreciate that. I appreciate you being honest. That you can't necessarily do it overnight. I did kind of go overnight, or within a couple of days, because I just thought I can't be a part of this. It doesn't work with me. But I do understand the practicality of, like, with families and stuff. It's difficult, and I've got my own issues, my own family, and they're at odds with what I believe in. I think they've got the same values as me, but what they do is different. Would I say pork? They're all as bad as each other.
Okay.
But I couldn't say one or the other. I couldn't sort of give preferential treatment to one, to say one's worse than the other. They're all rancid.
I know this is going to sound horrible, but like, if pigs are more intelligent, if it's really inhumane to what we're doing, maybe that's a place to like start. Like for someone who that leap's going to be too much. Like I've got a lot on at the moment, and like I can't retrain my whole like cooking schedule.
I appreciate that.
But what I can do is make small tweaks over time, and I guess, like, I'm not being horrible here, but a chicken, I think, has a way smaller brain, is probably way less aware of some stuff. It's still,
you'd
they're
be
still
surprised
aware
how
of
intelligent they are, though.
I understand that, but on a scale of that to a pig, maybe, like, if I was going to make one step, maybe it would be first.
Well, I appreciate, because anything that reduces the demand is going to be ultimately better, and we can start transitioning to more plant-based. I suppose I'm a bit sort of torn with what you're saying, only because for me it comes about the sentience, and it's not about the intelligence. It's like, so we wouldn't value a human with less intelligence any less than the human with more intelligence. That's where I'm coming from, so but if you don't feel that you can able to make the whole step in one go to away from animal agriculture, I appreciate just taking less supporting less and less the demand for animal agriculture will make a difference.
I think that's fair, and I think, like, if there was an education program of, like, maybe I should just learn and watch YouTube more, but like managing to cook as a vegan, like, that's something that people maybe need to know more of. Like, here's how to make a balanced meal.
I'm going to give you this card. Sorry, it's my writing's not the best. Hopefully you can read it. Challenge 22 just does just that. Okay. If you go onto that, and they'll even stock you up with a mentor. They'll send you recipes every day.
Okay.
You can just go on.
Is this your channel? Or is this...
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's one that I found and I use through other sort of people who on YouTube and other animal rights. The most important speech you'll ever hear by someone called Gary Yourofsky tells you all about the different animal agriculture industries. It doesn't have any, I think it's got a minute or two where he shows what happens. It's a bit graphic, and I had to sort of I couldn't stomach that, but it's just how well he speaks, it really conveys it well. And then Dominion, it's actually narrated by Joaquin Phoenix. That literally does go into detail about all the industries. It's got secret footage of all the industries, and that is very gruesome. I couldn't watch it. But if you've got the stomach that you can watch that, it will have an impact on you. But if you can't, can you just promise me you'll watch the other one at least? The most important speech you'll ever hear by Gary Yourofsky on YouTube.
I will put it on my list.
And try Challenge 22 as well.
I'll put it on the list.
Really appreciate that.
Cool.
Thanks so
Nice
much.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So mine's Tim. What's your name?
Gareth.
Gareth. Lovely to meet you.
All right, mate.
Thanks, Gareth.
What's your channel? Where do we?
So I'm just setting it up, and it's going to be called #Freedom. So if you search for that, find yourself on there.
Good luck, mate.
All right. Thanks, Gareth. All the best. Bye now.